You are already dead. You have been dead for 11 years. The only reason you don't know this yet is because the ship hasn't told you. The Meridian drifts somewhere between the Kepler Spur and the outer boundary of the Vael Corridor wound in space that no cartographer has ever agreed on, and that 3 separate expeditions have simply stopped returning from. The ship is old, not old in the way that ruins are old, crumbling and honest about their age, but old in the way that scars are old, shaped by something violent, healed over and never quite the same underneath. Its hull is black, not painted, not coated black the way a collapsed star is black, as though light itself made a decision about this vessel and chose not to come back. That is why they call it what they call it. That is why no customs database in 9 systems carries its transponder signal. That is why, when the Meridian appears on a passive sensor sweep, veteran pilots do one of 2 things. They file a report, or they change course. The smart ones do both. Inside, a woman named Sable Orin sits at the edge of consciousness, and the edge of a cot, running the calibration sequence on her left hand for the 4th time this cycle. The hand is not hers, it never was. Not really a 3rd-generation Casper prosthetic threaded with filament nerve mesh that connects to her spinal column at the T4 vertebra and runs cool diagnostics like a second heartbeat. She can feel the temperature of every object she touches to within 1/10 of a degree. She can feel the vibration of the Meridian's sublight drive through the floor, through the cot frame, through the soles of her boots, as a low and patient rumble the way you feel a sleeping animal breathe beneath your hand. She has not slept in 41 hours. She is by every metric available to the ship's biomonitor perfectly calm. The rules of this world are simple. If you know where to look, faster than light travel has existed for 2 centuries, but it does not come free. Every jump through a fold corridor costs the ship a precise measure of something the engineers call chronometric displacement, and what the pilots, privately, call debt. You borrow time from the fabric of your own future to collapse the distance between 2 points. The books always balance. The longer you run, the more you owe, and the universe is a creditor with infinite patience and no mercy. Most commercial vessels cap their fold jumps at 30 per standard year. Military vessels run 60, sometimes 80, under wartime protocols, and you can see it in the crews who survive long deployments. The way their eyes have learned to look at things that are they're the way they pause before answering simple questions, as though checking a clock in a room no one else can enter. The Meridian has no official jump log. The Meridian has no official anything. Neural links have been standard issue for 30 years. Thin lattice of synthetic dendrite grown into the prefrontal cortex during a procedure most people have done by age 12, the same way previous generations had wisdom, teeth removed or myopia corrected. They allow seamless interface with ship systems, with data networks, with each other. 2 linked individuals can share a thought the way you share a word, instantaneously, without translation error. The philosophical implications were debated furiously for about 15 years, and then everyone got used to it and stopped thinking about it, the way humanity always stops thinking about the things that become ordinary. Sable's link was removed 4 years ago, surgically exposed. She has a scar behind her left ear that she never explains, and when people try to handshake her on the network, the reflex greeting of the connected age, they get nothing back, just silence, just static. It is, in the circles she moves through, the single most interesting thing about her. She would like it to stop being interesting. The job came through a dead drop on Vera Station, a transit hub orbiting a gas giant so large it had developed 3 embryonic moons since the last survey. Slow stone children gathering themselves in the dark. Dead drops on Vera use analog relay, a physical chip, a physical reader, a physical handoff, because Vera sits in a signal shadow caused by the giant's magnetic envelope. And because the people who use Vera's dead drops are not the kind of people who want their communications logged. Sable received the chip from a port worker who did not make eye contact. This is also normal. She ran it through the Meridian's isolated reader, a machine that has never been networked, that has never touched the ship's main system that exists for exactly this purpose, and the file came up encrypted in Meridian 7, which is a cipher so old it predates the fold corridors, and which 3 people on any given station could crack in under an hour, and which therefore telegraphs immediately that whoever sent this message is either dangerously old-fashioned or dangerously smart. She cracked it in 40 minutes. The message was 9 words long. 9 words, a set of coordinates, and an attached file, 47 terabytes of something that the reader flagged with a classification she had not seen before. Not restricted, not classified, not even eyes only. The flag simply read, weight-bearing. Sable sat with that for a long moment. She had worked in extraction, in courier runs, in salvage recovery, in 2 jobs that she will take to her grave without naming. She had never seen weight-bearing. She come to ship's only other permanent crew member. A man who went by the name Caro, and who had 3 synthetic lungs and a voice like gravel, dropped into a metal drum, and she said, "I need you to look at something. Transmission log, Meridian 7, crew channel, cycle 441D. Caro, what am I looking at? Sable, I don't know yet. That's why you're looking at it. Caro, 12-second pause. These coordinates are inside the scar. Sable, I know. Caro, the scar doesn't have anything in it. That's the definition of the scar. It's a region of space that has been formally defined by the absence of things. Sable, I know that too. Caro, longer pause. What are they paying? The scar is what cartographers call a nullity zone, a region of space, approximately 3 light-years across, perfectly spherical, in which no stellar mass exists, no background radiation registers, and fault corridor navigation fails completely. Ships that try to jump within the scar's boundaries simply do not arrive anywhere. They are not destroyed, or at least, none of the debris analysis has ever suggested destruction. They simply cease to report, cease to be locatable. The theoretical consensus, held loosely and argued about at length in academic journals that most working pilots have no time to read, is that the scar is a region of localized fold interference, ancient, stable, and possibly artificial. The word artificial appears in those journals surrounded by qualifiers so thick you could choke on them, possibly perhaps consistent with the hypothesis that because no one wants to be the person who said it plainly and turned out to be wrong, or worse, turned out to be right. The 47 terabytes of weight-bearing data, once Sable spent 8 hours working through its outer encryption layers, turned out to be sensor readings, a full-spectrum passive array record from a probe that had been sitting at the edge of the scar's boundary for the timestamp said 914 years. The probe was a long listener, a class of automated sensor platform that predated the fold era, launched from a colony ship traveling at 0.3 and set to drift and record and wait. Someone had built this probe. Someone had aimed it at the scar. Someone had waited 900 years for it to fill up, and then someone recently, within the last 6 months, had retrieved its data, run it through whatever analysis engine could handle 9 centuries of multi-spectrum passive observation, and sent Sable 9 words and a set of coordinates. The 9 words were, "Something is waking up. We need to know what." Sable Orin is 38 years old and has been moving since she was 19, which means she has been moving for long enough that standing still feels like a symptom. She grew up on Callust, a mid-ring colony that made its living in algae protein processing and the quiet, grinding exploitation of people who wanted something the colony couldn't give them. Her mother had a neural link rated to the 7th harmonic raya, the kind of sensitivity that lets you feel the emotional weather of a room the way you feel temperature change, and spent the last years of her life in a sensory deprivation pod because the link had gone too wide to open, and the noise of other people's consciousness had become something she couldn't filter anymore. Sable watched that happen. Sable made her decision accordingly. Caro, whose full name takes 40 seconds to pronounce in his native dialect and who has not used it in a decade, is 62 and was a deep space mining surveyor for 30 of those years before a silicate rupture on a mid-belt asteroid took his original lungs and 3 of his ribs and the hearing in his left ear, and left him with a settlement that bought his first ship and a philosophy that can be summarized as follows. The universe is trying to kill you. This is not personal, and the appropriate response is not fear but professionalism. He has a tattoo on his right forearm in a script so old it no longer has a standard character set. And when asked about it, he says it is his mother's name. This is true. He does not say what it meant when she gave it to him as he boarded the transport that would take him off their home world at age 16 with exactly 1 bag and no plans to return. That is also true, and more complicated. They ran dark to the scar's edge. No transponder, passive drives only. The Meridian-S black hole swallowing the light of the Kepler Spur-S distant stars as it moved through the outer dark with the unhurried patience of a predator that knows it cannot be seen. 13 days. Sable used the time to go through the probe, data layer by layer, peeling back 9 centuries of nothing, which is what most of the record was. Genuinely, truly, nothing. The deep silence of a region of space that had been sitting empty since before humanity reached the stars until cycle 892 of the probe-S operation, approximately 60 years ago, when the nothingness changed. It did not change dramatically. That would have been easier to miss. What the probe recorded in cycle 892 was a shift in the scar's baseline. Gravitational signature so small that the probe's own analysis engine had flagged it as calibration drift and filed it under noise and moved on. But when you ran the full 9 centuries against an updated baseline, when you had modern processing to apply against ancient data, the pattern resolved. Not calibration drift, not noise, a pulse, regular as breathing. coming from the geometric center of the scar, which was, according to the coordinates in the 9-word message, exactly where they were going. On the 9th day of transit, the Meridian's external array picked up something it should not have been able to pick up. A fold corridor waked the residual spacetime distortion left by a ship, completing a jump less than 40,000 kilometers ahead, inside the scar's boundary, which was impossible, which the scar made impossible, specifically and definitively, by being the thing it was. Ship's LOG Meridian 7 AI interface, Cycle 449A Meridian AI designation. Law Hull sensors are registering a coherent gravitational lensing effect at bearing 074 by -22. This is consistent with a mass of approximately 2.3 kilometers in diameter at a distance of 38,000 kilometers. I have no record of any object at these coordinates. The object was not present on our approach scan 11 hours ago. I want to be transparent with you, Orin. I have run this reading through 7 independent verification protocols, and the result is consistent. Something is there. Something was not there before. I don't have a framework for that. Sable, are we being scanned? Law, not in any band I can detect. That's either reassuring or it isn't, and I genuinely cannot tell you which. They came to within 10,000 kilometers before Sable understood what she was looking at. The object, because object is what it was, undeniably and terribly, a made thing, a constructed thing, was roughly cylindrical, and it was old in a way that made the Meridian look like a new bruise. Its surface was not black the way the Meridian's was black. It was black the way closed eyes are black, a darkness that suggested something behind it rather than nothing. Its dimensions were strange in a way that her visual processing kept sliding off, not because the dimensions were unobservable, but because they registered as wrong in some deep, pre-linguistic part of her brain. The part that had evolved over 100,000 years to recognize the correct proportions of things and sound an alarm when those proportions violated expectation. The alarm was sounding. The alarm had been sounding for 40 minutes and she had been too focused on the data to hear it. The probe data resolved into its final answer like a sentence completing itself. The pulse from the center of the scar was not a natural phenomenon, it was a signal. And it was not that temporal analysis was very clear on this. It was not beginning. It was responding. It had been responding for 60 years to something that humanity's radio telescopes had begun broadcasting 61 years ago. The first standardized contact protocol, sent wideband across 17 frequencies in every direction, a mathematical greeting to any intelligence that might be listening. Humanity had sent it and assumed the silence that followed meant nothing was home. The silence had not meant nothing was home. The silence had been 900 years of an entity sitting very still in the dark listening, waiting to make sure, and 60 years of something like an answer forming in a mind so vast and patient that 60 years was the equivalent of clearing its throat. Sable sat in the Meridian-S cockpit and felt the Casperway hand registering the coolness of the console under her palm 1/10 of a degree below ambient, and felt the sublight drives pulse through the floor, and felt very specifically and precisely the weight of what she was looking at. This was not a salvage job. This was not an extraction. This was not even close to what those 9 words had prepared her for, or rather, those 9 words had been exactly right, and she had failed to understand them properly. Something is waking up, yes. Something had been asleep for a very long time in a house it had built to keep itself quiet and safe while it slept. And 60 years ago humanity had knocked on the door, and now she and a man with 3 synthetic lungs and a ship that ate light were sitting in the driveway. The message, when it came, did not come through any channel the Meridian had. It did not come through any channel at all. It arrived in the way that a certain quality of light arrives, not as transmission but as condition, not as signal but as understanding, as if the knowledge had always been present in the architecture of the ship and the air and the neurons of the people inside it, and had simply not yet been arranged into meaning. Sable did not hear it. Sable knew it, the way you know your own name, the way you know the layout of a room you have lived in for years without having to look. And what she knew was this: the entity in the scar had not built the scar to hide. The entity in the scar had built the scar to protect, not to protect itself, to protect everything else, because the entity she did not have a word for what it was, and spent the next several minutes trying to construct one, and failing had been awake once before, a very long time ago, in an era so distant that the stars that were alive then were cold now, had been cold for 1 billion years, and in that first waking it had looked out at the universe and found it full of life, brilliant and varied and absolutely unaware of what was coming, the thing it had seen coming, the thing it had been running from, the thing that traveled not through space but through the fundamental constants of reality, rewriting physics the way a virus rewrites code.